Welcome back, friends. In this video, we'll look at an interesting enhancement to the fruit slasher game, whereby when the fruits are slashed, we'll see that there's a flying split fruit created and also there's a splatter created, right? So what I mean is these two flying halves and then this splatter, right? So let's just try to understand what I'm trying to say. The class game or the original game that we had, basically whenever we slash the fruit, for example, now it just takes on a costume which is like sort of split version of itself, right? So for example, banana takes on this banana kind of opens up, right? But what I want to get to, stop this thing, is that a game where not only does the fruit take on a new costume, but in fact it gets two flying halves. Notice the like we saw in the watermelon or the banana, right? So two halves fly away, and we get this nice little splatter. Right now, my splatter is not that beautiful, but you can imagine that with better graphics and better fruits and so on and so forth, this will look really cool if the fruit really flies away, right? For example, here. So if I splash this, so this is what we want to do. We'll start from the basic game, but then we'll see what is it that we need to do to make the effect that we want to happen. Yeah. Now, first thing first, let us remember the basic scheme of the game, right? So remember that in this game we are playing with costumes. We are creating clones of the same same sprite, but we are creating clones with different costumes, right? So we had the uncut fruits as costume 1 to 5 and cut fruits correspondingly at costume 7 to 11, right? So apple to apple, banana to banana, and so on. So forth. This is important because we are just playing with costumes with some formulas, right? So costumes takes a nice value. Now we'll extend this scheme. Instead of just having a cut fruit single costume, in fact, we'll have two costumes now, right? So we'll have, like, for example, 7 to 11, top half of the fruit, and 12 to 16, say the bottom half of the fruit, right? So for every fruit we have this one, for example, 7 and 12, right? 2, 8 and 13. So banana top and banana bottom. And finally we'll have one costume for the splatter. Right now you can imagine that you can do multiple splatters. You can do splatter for every fruit, but those are basically going to follow the same kind of logic, right? But now the catch is that previously we could just change the costume of the clone itself, right? But here we can't, do that because we need to have two such costumes, right? So what we are going to do is to create more clones, and we'll identify what kind of clones do we have, right? So what I mean by that is that, remember, even the uncut fruits are basically clones. So now we are going to create more clones with these costumes, but then to do so, we must somehow figure out which clone we are talking about, because we are going to give individual behavior to each of these clones. Whenever this situation comes, the right approach is to use a variable only for this sprite, right? So that's what we will do. We'll create a variable called clone type, and that will be only for this sprite, right? And with this, we are going to get different behaviors for the different clones. Before we go to the code itself, let's just briefly understand what happens when a fruit is cut. So there are three clones that will be created. The one on the left will kind of take a jump towards the left. It's kind of sort of the top half, jump and then tumble down to the ground like the fruit was. It will make a small little jump here. The one on the right will make a small little jump to the right and drop down. So this should be right here. This is typo. And the splatter will just come there and sort of disappear slowly, right? So it's like slashed it, some kind of juice fell there, and it slowly disappeared. Yeah. Now, with this idea, let's go to the game where I have already I have the code as that was the basic game, but the modification here is that I have already given it the costumes the way I wanted, right? So basically, costume 1 to 5, like I said, is uncut fruit. Costume 7 to 11 is the top half. Costume 12 to 16 are the bottom halves, and the 17 is the splatter, right? So I've already done this modification. Now I'm going to come here to this code and make provision for creating all these sprites, right? So now remember, we have to create clones from inside a clone. Now what I mean by that is that the new clones have to be created whenever the fruit is cut, and the fruit cutting code itself is inside a clone, right? So we'll have a clone creating another clone, and that happens whenever the cutting condition happens, which means touching color gray and moving, right? So that's when the fruit gets slashed. Now previously we were just doing this position here, so we're changing costume number was 6, and that was giving us the new costume, right? But now we are going to create clones, like I said, and also, like I said, we are going to have to distinguish these clones, right? So what I've done here is that I've created a variable called clone type. Notice this is fruits clone type, which means it's only for this sprite, right? And for the uncut fruit, right, for the uncut fruit, I'm going to set this to okay, over here, let me see, just get this piece of code here, right? For the uncut fruit, I'm going to set this to set, say, clone type to 0, right? So that the uncut fruit is always There you go. So set clone type to 0. Now what I'll do is that I will just assign three different types of clone type 1, 2, and 3 before I create these clones, right? So now when I'm here, I'm going to say, okay, switch costume to costume plus 6, because remember that is still the top half of the fruit. Over here, before I create the clone, I will change this variable by 1. So I'll go and say change, let's say, clone type by 1. Remember, whenever I create a clone after having changed this value, the clone will be born, or let's say spawn, with this particular value. So which means the top half of the fruit can be created with clone type of 1. So I'll say create a clone of myself. Next, I will just duplicate this entire set of statements, these three statements, and I'll create one more clone, this time the bottom half. But remember, the bottom half costume is actually just 5 more, right? And why do I do 5? Because I'll just show you from the scheme that we discussed. The costumes are, there's a bomb in between the uncut fruit and the top half, so that's why it's 1 plus 6, so that's 7. But then beyond this is 7 plus 5, 12, right? And 8 plus 5, 13, and so on. So that's why I do plus 5. Next, I change clone type. I'll create a clone of myself, and I repeat this whole thing once again. I'll duplicate this whole thing once again. So I said this time round, I do not want to do switch costume to a number. Although, like I said, if you have different splatters per different fruit, you could have done that. But here I have only one fruit, right? One kind of splatter. So I will say change costume to say splatter. And before I make the clone, I will say change clone type by 1. So notice here, clone type of 0 is the uncut fruit, clone type of 1 is the top half, clone type of 2 is the bottom half, this thing, and clone type of 3 is the splatter, right? Now, with this done, I must do one more thing, which is that I must delete the original clone, right? Now, why do I need to delete this? Why did I not need this in the previous game, right? The reason was that in the previous game, the clone would just change costume and it will get deleted once it reaches the edge, right? But here we have spawned new clones, we have created new clones. That means the uncut fruit job is actually done, right? So we can say bye-bye to it by saying delete this clone. Now be careful, be clear that this delete this clone refers to the original fruit that was, that has been slashed, and all of this is happening, right? Now, with this done, we have to modify this part of the code, because we must tell what each type of the clone should be doing, right? So obviously each type of clone should show, so this part remains common, but thereafter a lot of things will depend on the clone type, right? So I will create an if statement here. I'll say if clone type is equal to 0. So nothing changes for the uncut fruits. That's why if clone type is equal to 0, I keep doing whatever I was doing, right? So I'll say if clone type was equal to 0, right? So I say clone type is equal to say 0. So this is absolutely the same as what was going on earlier, and hence nothing needs to change, right? However, if the clone type was 1, now remember, clone type 1 means it is the left half, right? So as I discussed in the scheme earlier, this guy should just jump a little bit to the left, which means that of course I don't need to set its costume, so I will not do this. I will say set x speed to, instead of -5 to 5, which could send it both right and left, I will set it a small little speed, let's say -4 to say -2, right? Now, why minus? Because I want this guy to go left, right? Now, remember from the code, it's always change x by x speed, right? So it's going to push this guy to the left. Also, I do not want it to jump so large as the original costume. So maybe I'll say maybe between say 2 and 4, right? So remember, y speed will control how high this guy jumps. So I'll set that to, this, say 2 to 4. I will rotate it the same way as earlier, and I don't need to do this, because I in fact want this clone to start from wherever it was created, and it was created when the fruit was slashed, which means it was created where the fruit was slashed. So this meets my requirement. I don't need to do this, right? Next, so of course I have to be careful. This has to be clone type equals to 1. I can put a comment here. This is top, right? So it's the top half. Now I can go and replicate this entire code to say, okay, if clone type is equal to 2, what do I do if clone type is equal to 2? Well, that's the bottom half. So first just change this comment so that's clear. It's actually very similar to the top half, except that this time round we want this clone to be going to the right side. So instead of -4 to -2, I'll say 2 to 4. Y speed, let it be. And then rotation also can be, right? Finally, if the clone type is 3, now remember 3 was the splatter. So if I duplicate this and I say if clone type is equal to 3, okay, I have to be a little bit careful over here, because otherwise, okay, I have to, yeah, maybe this thing has to move a bit. I don't lose track of this. So I'll put this over here, and then I'll put this over here, right? So this stays there, yeah. Now clone type is 3, remember, is a splatter, right? So SPLA TTER. Now for the splatter, I do not want it to move at all, right? So I'll set X speed to 0. I'll in fact also set Y speed to 0, right? We'll see this is not sufficient, but for now we'll do this. And then I'll set rotation also to 0 because I really do not want this to rotate, right? Now remember, this is all local variables. That's why this whole thing is working. Yeah. Now if I did this, see what happens, right? So when I do this, when I get the banana, notice banana goes into two halves and they just fly away, right? Now everything is fine here, but right now I see that my splatter is also falling down and it's not fading. Of course, it's not fade because we've not given it the code to fade. But the bigger problem right now is that my splatter is flying away, right? Let's just see this a little bit more. Uh, Wait for some more fruits to come. So I see that, for example, orange flies away. It looks nice, right? Both the halves fly away somewhere, and it will be very nice with, say, better sprites, better costumes for sprites. But this also looks nice. Now I'm going to do first try to understand why does the splatter also fly away, right? That's going back to the basic mechanism of this loop. Remember, we always have change y by y speed, or y speed was 0, all right, but change y speed by -1 because that's what is a gravity effect, as we have discussed before. So this is what is pulling the splatter down, like every other sprite, right? So we do not want this to happen. What we would do is that we would, before even anything can happen to splatter, we will kind of catch hold of it. So I'll just create another loop over here. So I'll say, another if condition over here. I'll say if, say, clone type, and we have to be careful where these things are going, right? Sometimes if one is inside the other, it can cause a lot of problems. So this is completely out of everything else, but inside the forever, right? So basically, I'll say if clone type is equal to 3, which is for the splatter. So if it's for the splatter, let me just see variables here. If, say, clone type is equal to 3. Now what do I want to do, right? I want to make sure that this guy, let's say, takes a random color. So I can use color effect here. I can say maybe set color effect to, say, something like, this is all optional anyway. I can say set it to something like maybe say 1 to 200 because it can take up any color that way, any hue of the color it shade it has. I can maybe turn it a little bit, just one time turn. So this is different from rotation, remember, because this is like a one time turn. And this one time turn can also be between, let's say 1 and 360 degrees. So basically it just turns completely. It can take a full circle, right? And thereafter, or maybe not so much, let's say I'll make it, say, it doesn't matter really, right? -20, you say 20 degrees, doesn't matter really. So I will now do this. Now I will want this guy to just disappear, not move too much, not move at all, but disappear. So what I can do is that I can say repeat, for example, repeat, say 10 times, and I can use the ghost effect, right? So I'll say change ghost effect by, say, not color effect. In fact, I'll say change, say ghost effect by maybe, say, 10 because I wanted to go to 100. So 10 times 10 is 100. And maybe I can add a little bit of a weight here, right? So I'll just add a little bit of a weight between, in this. So I'll say between, in this loop, I'll just add a little bit of a weight so it looks nice. And within this if itself, I will delete this clone. So once this repeat statement gets over, I will delete this clone, right? So that way, what will happen is that the splatter will not move. In fact, once it exits this loop, it would have got deleted, right? So splatter will just do this much, this portion, and that will get deleted, right? So let's just see this. When a fruit comes, yes, and notice I get the splatter coming out. In fact, I can do one more thing here, which is that I can send splatter to the back layer so it doesn't obscure the view of the game, right? So I'll do that. In fact, I'll just go to looks and I'll also say send splatter to back layer, which means I'll say, here, go to back layer, right? So go to, say, back layer. Now if I did this, it will be nice because splatter will not obscure my view of the fruits. It looks really cool. Fruits fly away randomly and then I get this nice splatter, right? So I hope you enjoyed this and you can implement this in your project too. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye.